Hey there, my name is Joaquin Malata, and I'm the host of the AI Digest podcast. With me today is Mary Salami. Mary is a PhD student in geospatial, and today we're going to be talking about applications of AI in geospatial, climate, and society. So, those are some pretty big buckets, some pretty big categories, but we're going to do our very best to cover everything there and in between. Mary, it's a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jacqueline. Yes, I'm really glad to be, and thanks for the invites for this podcast. I'm really glad to be here. So, yeah.
It's my pleasure. Mary, maybe we can begin by just talking a little bit about, who you are, what you do, and a little bit of background on the thesis that you're pursuing right now.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yes. I'm Mary, just like you said. I am a PhD student at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and I currently work on the areas of generative AI to climate, and it's basically understanding of people afterwards, after a climate disaster has happened, so in the environment or community. So right now, like what my research really fully entails is understanding how we could use generative AI models, and which is the large language models that we are really familiar with, the ChatGPT, and using them on how they can geographical aware first, and also how can we understand the extent at which we can understand how people feel, or the psychological behind, or any natural disasters that have happened in a particular community. So that's what my research is all about. And thank you.
My pleasure. And you also have a very strong background in machine learning, right?
Yes, of course, yes. Basically, before my PhD program, I've had the opportunity to work in machine learning firms, data science firms. So I have a strong background in the machine learning algorithms, and also the use of the deep learning algorithms too. So, and that was what I did in my master's degree too. So, and I'm moving forward into my PhD program. So that's like the goal. Yeah.
Is there a reason why you're pursuing machine learning and generative AI in geospatial? What drew you to that field?
Yeah, so the reason it's more because of my interest. So I'm interested in the use of AI, and we know that we have like basically like the computer science field side of it, things where they produce all of these algorithms, and how can we? The interesting part for me is how can we use these AI tools and apply them into geospatial, like in the geospatial field, and that's what brought my interest into like the use of AI itself. So yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about geospatial. I had to pull up an image of latitude and longitude because I always got them confused. But latitude is with the equator, so horizontally going around the planet Earth, and then longitudinal is going
The
above and wrapping around, right?
Yes, the market.
So we have a fixed space, right, in three dimensions.
Yeah, actually.
Um, what is it about geospatial that we need to understand for this conversation to be productive and for people to get a better understanding?
Yeah, so that's a good start into like XYZ itself. Why when I think about geospatial, to bring it more into like the basic or simple definition into it is when I think about where and why and how itself. So basically, when you're thinking about where, it's this happening, where is something happening. So let's just use that as where, like, we ask those questions like daily in our daily lives. Oh, where is this happening? So that's just special. And you say, oh, how is it happening itself? So how is it happening over time, when the question of time comes in? So that's gonna be just special. And when you think about, okay, which area at which this events is happening itself, or which area is experiencing this itself, would be geospatial. So the X and Y and Z into it, which define the area, the location itself, or location of Earth surface itself. It ties down into all of those three questions. So when you start ask questions related to where, which, and how, it gives you is a definition of what geospatial is, and the information that's connected to those location of the Earth surface, which is the X, which we point out to the latitude and longitude of the Earth surface itself. So yeah.
And geospatial is such a wide-reaching field of study, right? I mean, it applies to agriculture, it applies to architecture, to meteorology,
Yeah.
transportation,
Mhm.
supply chain, logistics, a bunch of other applications that I probably can't even begin to think about. Fishing,
Of course.
there's so many things that it touches, right?
Yeah, yeah, and that's why the interesting thing part of it is that, and that was the reason why I pointed out that we actually ask all of those questions in our daily lives. So the wide range at which we can even like comprehend, though the extent at which we use all of this, geospatial is about is the fact that we have those questions in mind, which is the where, the how, and why, and which. So when you start thinking about all of those things and you just write them, bringing our paper out, like, okay, the experimental part of it was when I was back in undergrad and we're trying to understand what geospatial is. And the professor asked or said, oh, can you just like write out like where itself, like start thinking about where, like just where is this happening? Just think about an event. Where is this happening? So, and when you think about that, you start pointing into different applications. Okay, you see, like we have geologists, we have the we just start pointing out that a lot of fields, like, right. So, and then you start asking how, in terms of time, you start thinking about, okay, you think about like the every events that comes with time. So, and with that again, you're thinking about, okay, why is this happening, and why is this event happening? So all of those questions, you start pointing out different fields, and that really needs geospatial. So when you think about health application of geospatial is there. When you think about the city urban planning, you see that there's a lot of applications of geospatial in that. And when you start thinking about, okay, I'm going into geology fields, there's all like where you can point out that this is where this you can actually apply geospatial into it. And you start thinking about material science, you think about that too. You think engineering, civil engineering, you start thinking about, okay, this is exactly where we can actually apply this into. So when back in undergrad, like, before that was, after my undergrad, a little bit when we had COVID, that was the realization. I see a lot of applications when it comes to geospatial too, because in the understanding of global health itself, we start seeing like dashboard being created in response to knowing, oh, where is this happening? Oh, where do we have the rise of COVID? What's going on? And that's where geospatial too start kicking in. A lot of applications, we see a lot of technology, a lot of people are using, and there was like it was more like a global awareness to people to understand. People said, oh, do you know understand what just like do you know geospatial? Have you heard anything about geospatial before? And before that, we have the rise of technology itself, and people were just more into like computer science. People are doing like medicine, law. Back in Africa, so like in Nigeria, basically. So we were more into like, oh, lawyer, medicine. Those are the fields that were rising, and there was nobody talking about geospatial until that event happened, and people were like, oh, do you know anything about geospatial? Oh, wow, you're in geospatial field. Oh, that's interesting, that's a great field. And people started like paying more attention into that, because like, at that time, people really do not have more awareness into it until that event happened. So yes, It's a broad a broad field that's, I mean, one could even get lost into it if you don't really have a specific where you're going, or what research or what interests you, basically, that you want to solve, or a problem you want to look into, because it's a really broad area.
I'm, you know, yeah, we could get lost in any one subdivision of this topic, any specialization of this topic, any application, and there are many. Perhaps we could start out by talking about the forces of nature, the phenomenon that make up day and night, the wind, moisture, humidity,
Mm.
lightning strikes, electrical charges, uh, the tectonic plates moving. I mean, can we talk a little bit about what it means to use geospatial um, to track these things with data, with sensors, with logs?
Yeah. So yeah, that's a good one. Like, honestly, like, if we go into, like, that would be more into like climate tracking. So if we start thinking about the use of geospatial into like climate tracking, environmental monitoring itself. So basically we see the understanding of, like, oh, we have the drought patterns, flood prone zones, and we're still thinking about rainfall anomalies, and all of these things are indicators of where we use geospatial intelligence tools. And when we're going back into the intelligence tool itself, is that when we think about those, we have like satellite imageries, which are like products of geospatial itself. And this is event at which we use remote sensing. So a remote sensing application would be collecting using satellites, but not being physically present or be able to touch that entity itself. So when we have like satellite imagery capturing the Earth surface itself, and that's what would produce a satellite imagery. So, and in the imagery, we have the pictures of, like, let's just say, a pictorial view of the Earth surface, like or a landscape. So in the landscape where we capture, we have the greenery area, we have the body, the water bodies rather. So we have all of this in this landscape. So, and with all, we can actually use that in tracking, understanding, like, oh, any climate indicators, basically, like, oh, we can have the temperature, the cloud cover, the storms, like storm understanding, like using that to track like climate. So if we have a case at which, let's say we have like a 5 years prone event of drought for a particular location, and that has been portrayed them over years. And let's say we can just have like a 5 years satellite imagery of before that existing year that we want to track. We could use that to see or to understand, or like the what I say, like the extent at which this has been occurring over time. Like, okay, how severe, the severity of the drought in that location. So just by looking at that, we just use, like, perform some geospatial analysis to understand that, okay, what kind of issue do we have, like, what does it look like, what we have in terms of tracking. Then we track using all of the satellite imagery that we've gotten to understand the damages, or like what has changed over time. So, and that's where we ask the questions how. So then we have like the question of how and where comes in terms of this application. Yeah.
I just want to say the two people started saying hi. So I just want to say hi back. Hi, Adriana. Hey,
Hi.
Key. Um, but you're making a really good point on how to apply these streams of data. I can think of like when somebody has a kid in their house and they want to track the way that they grow over time, they take their head against the wall and make the markings over time to see the rate of growth of the individual.
Exactly.
Or when people take a camera and they point it at a plant or a seed, and they watch as the seed grows over time, and you get to see the time lapse. that's being implied at a macro scale, right? Where you keep track of ecological changes, the watershed, the lakes are shrinking, the
Yeah.
lakes are growing, the rivers are cutting through different deltas or whatever.
Yes.
The forests are growing, the forests are shrinking. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, and that's a very good way to put it also. Like when you look into like if like, let's say this child stopped growing and you just want to like understand what's going on. Okay, did I miss something? And then you just have to look into it like based on what you've been the data you've put in before and what you have because you've tracked it. So then you start looking at what has been happening previously. So that's the same thing we can put in terms of satellite images that we have. Yeah.
And you mentioned something interesting. It's a trigger word for me, anomaly, and that tells me, machine learning wise, you input vast amounts of logs, of data, of imagery, and that is computed to see where is the linear patterns and where are the discrepancies of information. Right? Can you
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about that anomaly detection?
So basically, if we have in understanding like anomalies, like when we start thinking about like okay, the applications of where like what we have like a scenario of which is out of the expected or different from the normals or like the expected usual. Okay, we have like oh, there's a usual temperature we're used to, and then there's a sudden change maybe the temperature or the temperature like increase, then that's going to be like anomaly. Then we start thinking about okay, how can we track or what's the scenario that's happening that's abnormal, like okay, this if we have a location that has been experiencing a maybe like a sudden change in the temperature, then we start looking at okay, what's the anomaly, what's causing this, what is the reason behind this. So, and then that kicks in terms of the use of the climate, the use of geospatial tools basically to understand the meaning of what's going on in this event or this scenario. Yeah.
And even though there are anomalies, things that are unexpected, right? Like spikes in a particular activity,
Yeah.
there are early warning signs that could be detected, little patterns that kind of give you a hint or a whisper that something's
Mhm.
going to happen. So that's where your master's thesis was, right?
No, no, no. My master's thesis was on the understanding of the behavior of animals. Like that was completely like different.
Oh,
So
okay. Migration patterns. Okay,
yes, the migration patterns of like the
okay.
patterns of yeah.
But okay, so let me backtrack and let me try to reframe it. So from the weather patterns, from the telemetry, from the
Yeah.
sensors, from
Hmm.
the satellite imagery, you're collecting these data points, and there are seasonal things that happen across the year. There is like storms that happen in a particular time of the year, a
Yeah.
lot of rainfall in other parts, snow, it's sunny, it's dry. How do you use this cyclical pattern to help inform local populations that something bad is going to happen or maybe that they should prepare?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good one. Like honestly, if we have like a abnormal, like like there's an analysis that's been performed over time and it has been saying that oh, there's something like this gonna happen. I mean, it takes like I think there's a particular field into like the climate they that will be dedicated into that to like make sure that the public is aware about what's going to happen, and it's more of like prediction. So we've done like prediction, we've done like simulation into what's going to happen in 5 years. I mean, let's say 5 years is long, so that's just like a shorter temporal prediction. So if you say oh, in 5 months, in 6 months, we're tracking this weather patterns, and then or maybe this temperature, we've already seen like a spike or what's going on, like something unusual is going to happen. So like there's abnormal rainfall going to happen into this anomalies, and we've seen that already. So it takes like the for us to like the analysts to look into like okay, how can we just like, through like simulations of if this is going to get out of hand, if things are going to happen in a different way. And that takes a lot of like prediction happening. So a prediction simulation of occurrence, like even if what if occurrences are, or scenarios have been played out, if even if there's no anomalies detected or anything. So there's so this is like a specialty whereby they have to like, start looking into like predictions or simulations. So the kickoff of simulations into that, okay, what are we going to like see in coming years when it comes to this particular this location or this particular area, in terms of the rainfall, in terms of the drought happening or the occurrence in this environment. So yeah.
These are people that perhaps work for insurance companies, right? Deep statisticians that kind of work on scenario planning, like what is the
Yeah.
likelihood that a natural disaster will occur in the city, and
Yes.
hence what would be the natural impact in terms of financial figures, or how we have to measure risk in terms of how we develop these policies. I mean, that's what comes to mind when it comes to risk
Uh,
management and
yeah.
proactive alert systems and stuff like that, like coordinating with like federal emergency management services.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't have to be also be like insurance too. I think the NGOs, also like government, like organizations also go into this because they have like specific, maybe organization dedicated to like the climate. I mean, climate centers, and they do all of those things, all of this analysis. Yeah.
And they also inform the farmers and producers of livestock and things that require a very precise kind of environment, right? Because that informs how they should invest their
Yeah.
money and resources into yielding crop.
Exactly. Yes. So like it's a form of like afterwards, then decision makers are like have to like kick into this, like, okay, I will get to pass this across to the people, and so they can be prepared for what's coming next. Yeah.
What else should we know about natural disaster response management?
I think what else do we have to know? Basically, it's yeah, we could also think about like how people like the towards like my research, like towards what comes after the 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 disaster itself. Like, okay, what happens in terms of what do people think about if a drought happens or a wildfire occurred in their environment? How do people feel about this? And also, which is really interesting, so anyone could think that, oh, it's out of geospatial line because it's more like psychological, because what do people think? So it's also like people make decisions. What are the decisions they make afterwards? So in that sense, we could see, okay, or do we have a lot of people still coming into that environment? Do we have people still building, or do we have still people locating or relocating or going out of this environment? So what happens after? Do we see migration out to outer migration, in or in migration happening? So this is also a case of the use of geospatial itself, and in the rise of the, I mean, AI itself that we have. I mean, the use of this machine learning algorithms that are increasing. Basically, we have algorithms like the large language models that it's rising on now. So we could understand, okay, what aspects are like, what kind of decisions do people make afterwards in terms of the disaster, like in disaster management, understanding what kind of decisions are we going to see, or simulating, oh, what kind of decisions are going to happen, or do people that kind of like move out of this environment once a disaster occur, or what decision is going to be happening, like what kind of decision is going to happen afterwards. So that's a area which is really interesting, and a question we could be asking in terms of geospatial. So like these are questions that kick out starts in terms of the applications of AI to in addition to natural disaster and geospatial. Yeah.
I would like to dig in. First of all, let me just say hi, Trish. Hi, Omar. Thanks for joining in. I would like to dig into the migratory response of animals
Oh,
in
yeah.
in regard to man-made disasters and
Mm,
natural disasters, because I can only imagine, if there's an oil spill, birds and fish are affected, and that affects local population, local economy. You
Mm,
have, something happen like a nuclear reactor explodes in Chernobyl. That affects the local population and the way that that land can be used until it's remediated.
yeah.
So I'd love to understand, your perspective on what you've kind of studied in that area, and what
Mm.
are some of the things that we should know about that too.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. So like there was a particular research, I kind of forget the animal in question. Yeah, but it's is it Korean? Yeah, it's more like a tiger or something, but it wasn't it's really coyote or coyote. Yeah, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it well, but then yeah, so I there's a particular paper that did the authors actually worked on that, on understanding where like like the study area was in LA, so because we have a lot of the animals around, so they wanted to understand why what kind of urban area or settlements do they like move
Oh,
into.
coyotes,
Yeah,
coyotes.
it is.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
really. Yeah. So like, yeah, they wanted to know what kind of like urban area do they like move in? Like, where do we see them more often? So, and the study was trying to like I mean, they were not trying to. They did that already on they see that they kind of go more into the areas where they are more like when I say like wealthy environments compared to, so like we see more pollution occurrence like environment. So like also like boiling that into like disaster, like we could see think like, oh, like tracking animals basically when we have natural like wildfires. Okay, do we see them moving out of this environment itself? And or because I mean basically my master's was on tiger, but we see that tiger really like an environment where it's more there's a lot of vegetation and there's water bodies around that particular environment. So basically if we have something like that, I mean they will kind of like migrate into an environment which is much better than that also in the study area. So and we see like tigers are also like territorial animals whereby they really like they are really all like grounded into the environment itself, so they cherish the territories, right? So and with that like it's really they are big on the territories. So and if we have an occurrence of that happening, like human settlements or like natural disasters coming into the territories, would be a very big disadvantage to them, and they would have to also migrate from that. I would see like a migration pattern seen in that scenario. So yeah, so I think that's going to be like yes in terms of animals, like about with humans where we have like the applications of like AI into like geospatial with natural disasters. We see like decisions making to like in terms of migrating, and some people would not leave that. I mean, understanding like how we would make decisions, right? People would not leave like that environment knowing that they would just have to like prepare more, or like oh they would if like I think there was also a study in terms of this, like in terms of applications like in geospatial with natural disaster. So understanding wildfire, like the tracking of wildfire like events and how in the migrations patterns happens like before and after natural disasters have occurred, and also understanding the road blockages and all. So like there's a study on that. So on the trajectory of humans during wildfire. So what happens, and with that also like one of the things that was highlighted, I liked that out of the study was that people tend to like leave and then they just come back to that environment again once once that as the occurrence have is done or something has happened. I mean it's been contained already in that environment. So and the decisions within that in the social science part, as in I haven't come across any study on that area whereby people tend to like make okay this is the reason why we actually came back to this environment. But psychological thinking would think about like oh people don't want to leave that environment, maybe basically because that's where the family ties is or something like that, or we have
Legal, financial reasons. Maybe they
financial
own
reasons.
land.
would also think like also thinking about that. So they would not want to leave that environment. So yeah, and some people would just make sure that they are migrating out of that particular environment. So which is an interesting area to study or questions to ask in terms of research.
You bring up a good point. I mean, it's very difficult to study natural disasters because you don't. I mean, sometimes you don't expect them,
Yeah,
and there is no data log describing what that is because this is something that's an anomaly. It's a
yeah,
spike in something happening that is unexpected.
yeah.
Mm,
And one of the things that might cause like maybe like wildfire events would be could be human or like human starting points doing that, or maybe like lighting in a fire prone area happens, and that would just it's gonna like escalate beyond control, and that would cause a lot of things. So that could happen, and and also like have a spike in anomalies, and and we don't really like expect that happening, but it occurred. So yes.
so, what are some of these applications of AI in natural disaster management? You mentioned scenario planning, right? Like you have data points and you can create a simulation,
Mhm.
otherwise known with some people as a digital twin, right?
Yes. So yeah, I mean, yes, you're right. So, like, yeah, we have scenario planning. You could like just understand how, like, you could do like forecasting or prediction on what it's happening and how, okay, if this happened, what's going to cause, or what's going to be an and what would it entail? Another interesting thing was like Microsoft actually did a very interesting I think is it Turkey disaster that happened. I think it was an earthquake that happened in Turkey, and they tried to like bring a model out using AI to understand like count the number of buildings that got damaged during the natural disaster itself. So they did that, and which is an interesting take on the applications of AI itself. And I mean, beyond that, also we've seen um based on papers I've read and also like what we're working on, it's we've seen like like predictions of hurricanes, and also like understanding the damage control, like okay, what kind of damage, and what are people saying. I mean, using that's going to be like more of like the social part, and adding geospatial. Okay, what happened afterwards, and like the aftermath of this disaster occurrence. So that's another thing. It also like to in combination of that. So I mean, also like for what I'm doing in terms of my research, also boils down into like applications of using AI to just understand human perspectives of like the aftermath of what has happened, or decisions they make towards any natural disaster that has occurred in the environment. So
And what are the applications of that information? Like, who are the downstream consumers of that? What kind of organizations, NGOs?
yeah, so basically it's more like to be able to this would be used in integration to like telling like humanitarians on how like people would see like a particular disaster happening in that environment, and how what decisions they make. So and that would be an information to be for policymakers to use that as a way to help in I mean for that community or that particular area. So yeah. So the findings actually. So because I'm still like working on it. Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned, these digital models. What are some other applications? How can this inform infrastructure investments and maybe cities or infrastructure like roads or bridges or whatever? What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so very interesting, because what I mean, part of the things we were talking like just like adding into like natural disaster into this into like my part of the thing we just highlighted was migration. So understanding like one of the things is that in terms of infrastructure, or people who could know environments that okay, this particular environment, how do people, what kind of activities do they do? Like, if we're interested in that, we could understand like the daily life movement. If we have that data, which is more like the latitude, longitude, we just need X and Y, honestly, and the time. So, and we could see that, okay, what kind of patterns do we see individuals go doing? Do they go to the green space area more often? What do they use the green space area in the environment, or they go to another particular location, or do they prefer that compared to the one in the neighborhood? Or it's is that what they want? Was that what they do? What kind of activities do they entail in? Do they go to work in the morning? We see like, oh, what activity are they going to the like on Mondays is people are they prone to go to like are meant to go to work and they come back. Do we see people doing that? And like, just understanding like, oh, the activities in which a community or like they go like they do more often. And with that also we could use like, okay, with that we see like, okay, if we calculate we can get like, oh, simulations, or like, oh, we have that people tends to do more like into walking, and then is it like walking, or they're just trying to like, and we see like speed, if we have speed data into that, it gives us more information beyond just knowing the activities. Because when speed comes in, we can now calculate, okay, this person is tending to like work, and we know that they're actually using their car to do this. And with that we can have like understanding of roads. Okay, how busy would this road look like in during Thanksgiving? Like Thanksgiving, or are people going to be going out more often during Thanksgiving? Oh no, it's because it's Thanksgiving. We see that people are at home, and this would inform us, like we'll get more enlightened into like just looking at this data. And that's why I mean at the beginning of podcast we started with like, it's just beyond measure on how we can use geospatial like knowledge itself, like just understanding it, just having all of this data coming together, the speed, we get more information detailed about individual lives of people. So yeah.
That's an interesting perspective. I don't frequently stop to think about aggregate behavioral patterns of
Mm,
people in a city. I think that's an interesting thing.
yeah.
But that is an important data set that requires a lot of consideration for, are people not going to green spaces? Do we not have sufficient green spaces?
Yeah.
Are people congesting a road? Do we have to create additional roads to create a more relaxed flow of traffic?
Yeah.
Do we have sufficient public transportation? Do we have sufficient kinds of services that allow for the ease of use, right? Accessibility.
Mm. Yes, and that's really interesting. Like also like there was a time, I mean, like 3 years ago when I started my program, I think what I was just going through a paper, like just one of the papers I saw on Google Scholar. And what was also interesting was like the transportation mode of people. And this was based on like the colors, and do people tend to like want to use people that stay in this particular location? Do they tend to use, or maybe based on people's color, or do they use the bus? Women also, like looking at women, do they use the bus, or they try not to use the bus because of safety reasons? And you see that's very interesting, because you see that and say, oh, some women are just not using the bus because of the safety reasons, and at
There's
night.
not enough. There's
And
not enough light. There's not enough safety. There's not enough cameras.
exactly. So that's another thing too. Like, that
Wow.
goes with infrastructure, like also like city planning, and people tend to like, and this inform like gives more information, or like, okay, we have to plan this, and based on the facts that the women in the society don't want to use the bus or use the transportation system just because it's night. So like at night, so with the informations of this is basically just using the information of the geospatial data that we have with time. So, and that gives like a lot of information, I mean, to the city planners or urban planners itself. Yeah.
I was talking to a friend. He was living in Spain, and we were discussing differences. I mean, I live in New Jersey.
Mm,
He lived in New Jersey, but he moved to Spain. But we were talking about public transportation, the development of the city, how those cities in Europe are more livable for walking and bicycling. You know, he likes to bicycle, and if he has to go long distance, he has train. But here, you know, it's kind of dominated by automobiles, right? Like car, truck, bus, whatever. So you're bringing up a lot of interesting points there.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes, I mean, also like, yeah, in Europe, like one of my friends in Netherlands was telling me about how they use like, cycling and
mhm.
things like a lot too. So if we have that information, we could understand like, oh yeah, we have this, or a lot of people attend to like cycle a lot in this particular time. And maybe during winter, they don't tend to do that. What kind of how many percentage of people do cycling during winter? So we kind of understand that. Or is it that people tend to do it more when it comes to summer? And questions that we're not thinking about, but then it starts generating itself just by looking at the data itself. I mean, after doing analysis.
And this informs global population and policies that are enacted, or social welfare programs to like make people aware of different tools that they have available, or maybe that the city needs to invest in to support a healthier population, right? Like, do we need to build bicycle lanes in the road so people feel safe to adopt healthier habits, less consumption of resources?
Yeah, that's a thing that also, like, when we think about this, like we see that like investment into like, oh, do we have to people like investing into like, maybe, okay, what can we do to make things easier or better for the people? So those questions comes into the NGOs, like also the companies that are creating, maybe the cycling companies. So like all of those things helps to inform, like just doing this research can help them to make better decisions to help the people too. So in one way or the other, you're contributing to the lives of the people. So yeah.
So, what can we talk about in regards to trusting this information? I
Mm,
mean, there are some practices that have been around since before LLMs, right? Like like statistical analysis. People counted things, people took pictures over periods of time.
yeah.
The advancement in technology has allowed the facility of doing this at a higher frequency, right? Like you could get a bigger picture because we have satellite systems that are floating around the earth, and we can take sensors of like farms and forests because now we have remote sensors and we have the necessary telecommunications to sustain the transmission of those signals. But what can we trust, and what are some things that we need to take with a grain of salt when we are talking about geospatial intelligence?
So yeah, just thinking about like, the trustworthiness itself, there's a lot of like data governance like research or like rise right now coming out, because there's questions behind all of this data or the informations that we get, especially when it comes to like researchers like us, like, oh, producing our papers, and how much can we actually leverage all the information or the findings that we've provided. So more of this, it's like having like more like data governance into in place in terms of like in research basically, and also the replicability of the research. So if we have the data that you find, and you find this information, and how open are you going to be to let another researcher to look into what you've produced, and you've said, okay, you have the data, these are the information you've gotten, these are the findings. So how replicable is your research? How people can, and that brings the trustworthiness into it, because you're providing a very critical, like this, all of these informations are really sensitive, especially when it comes to geospatial. So you're looking into the sensitive part of people's life and people's decisions or community decisions that you want to inform the NGOs, you want to inform people on this. And let's say, for instance, you get a findings about like the natural disasters, and you say, oh, I just found this. And at the end of the day, you give the information on, oh, drought is going to happen in this, or I just make a simulation or prediction that this would happen, and you communicated this to the people, and maybe the agricultural, farmers have to stop doing this particular thing, and that means they have to stop the life or something. And that's really a sensitive thing to, just, trust into what you found as a analyst or as a researcher into yourself. So, and that brings into like just having to be able to like make your research more replicable, and also like going into like a kind of guide and transparency. So more like frameworks are also like coming in. I have colleagues that are doing research in trustworthiness and data fairness right now. And what they are bringing into it's like a framework designed whereby or a benchmark whereby you as a researcher are going to have to follow some benchmarks and into before even like submitting your manuscript. So, and that helps in promoting the use of this algorithms that you use, or probably like the use
Right.
of
There's like consistent formats for submitting your data
Mm,
so that anybody can take it and run it through an algorithm that's already been
exactly,
kind of
exactly.
accepted within the practice.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that's the I think that's the way, or the like, in order to like be able to make sure that there's a trustworthiness when that comes to this data, yeah, or the findings.
I find open science, fair principles, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. I mean, those two things kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point of being able to trust and build on each other's work.
Mm,
We've had this conversation before where there's a frustration in academia with scientists and people that are moving up and writing their dissertations when they try to reference and use or reproduce the work of other people before them.
mm,
Sometimes the data sets are locked behind a proprietary ruling, right? Like they have an NDA because they did it in association with a private company, a for-profit company, and
yeah.
it's part of their intellectual property. Yeah.
That's true. That yeah. It's especially when it comes to the geospatial, like yeah. So I think that's why we have like a rising to geospatial field right now, because there's a lot of no like open source when it comes to data, and also like the fact where we have like a replicability happening in geospatial. I'm really much aware when it comes to the computer science field, the replicability of the work and how they kind of make it really open before even publishing the papers. But we have like, I would say like the limitations to geospatial in because of the, like you said, the proprietary that's content that comes with it. So that's the area where we like that's the basically like what we will see in geospatial, and that's why we have like new field now, or new area of research that people are really like interested in when it comes to geospatial, like making it more trustworthy, and also like data fairness and governance happening in geospatial field. Yeah.
How are you shaping up your PhD thesis? And are you involving multimodal generative AI in any way?
Oh yeah, so I think we should talk about multimodal like a little bit. Just like multimodal, it's like you're adding like the applications of images, text, and into the applications of AI to geospatial. So when we have the remote sensing, and then you're adding like questioning it, so where is this data bodies on the satellite imagery, now it becomes multimodal. So, and multimodal aspects, I'm doing that for my research, so it's going to be looking at that in one of my chapters for my dissertation. So I'm hoping to like be able to do that. So like one of my proposals is saying that already, that I'm going to do add the text part of it, so whereby there's a like just like an open like QA, so where we have just special data, and then you can ask question like query it out. So yeah, or give it a prompt. So yeah.
And what is the advantage of being able to use multimodal generative AI as an interpretive layer? Before we started recording, you made a hint that it used to be computed very manually, and you needed a specialized kind of trained hand to be able to decipher what's going on with certain patterns in data. but now we have something that can enable an easier interfacing, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Like, yeah, so the thing is, like, before ants, we could, if we have like satellite images and you're working with that, you would have to start looking at, okay, where is the water body, or you're trying to like have to um search where the vegetation areas are. But with the use of AI tools that we have now, and you could just try to just like put the images out, and then it just like cycle it out less than 30 minutes. This makes it much easier for an analyst or a researcher to use these tools or models in the application, in the use of AI itself. Like, so, and with that, like also like boiling down into like the areas and where we can apply this basically to my research. And I mean, how this is really like helpful is that you we could have the satellite images and say, okay, where is the drought occurring, or just like put in images, and then which is also easier for the people. Like, it does not have to you don't have to be geospatial inclined to use these tools, or like the rising tools that are coming out now, so that people can be able to use this basically to do any research. So once you have that, you can just query or give it a prompt, and then just upload your satellite images, and then it would help you out in your analysis. So yeah.
And you mentioned the verification, the more adherence to a standard is only going to help generative AI have cleaner data sets so that it can provide you with richer responses and do better comparisons because everything's going to be in the kind of same shape, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so definitely, like, yeah, just looking at the images and you put it in, so it can help. Like, if we have those, like, with the tools coming out right now, we can actually have them like being helpful in terms of just analyzing, okay, this is what you need to do, or these are the things that will be done, and then you can give it a prompt. So make it more easier for you as a person, or you don't even have to think so much, even if you are not just specially like inclined. So.
Anything that we should know from your work that's coming up, something you're doing now, anything you'd like to share that you're kind of seeing at the very edge?
Yeah, so right now I'm working on my manuscript, so which is a taxonomy for the socio-environmental systems itself and the use of generative AI. So basically, like looking at how the broad aspect of SDS and social environment, I mean social development systems. So looking at that in the area of generative AI, and looking at what has existed and what have been done, and also like building a taxonomy. So like introducing a taxonomy for other researchers.
What is a social development system? Is that like
So,
an ecology, like studying how like fauna, flora,
so
people? What is
yeah,
that?
human systems are there. So I'm looking social environmental system basically. I mean SES, so it's not SDS, so rather. So that would be like we're looking at the human part of the research. You're looking at ecological aspects of it, and also like the environmental. So like it's basically what we've discussed so far, like this social science. So looking at how this has expanded, and also looking at the human response, decision makings that comes with it, and what has been done when it comes to generative AI so far. And then I'm introducing like a novel approach for like a taxonomy behind that. So yeah.
And where do you hope to take this taxonomic development?
So
The things that you're experimenting with. What are some of the applications?
So basically, it's going to be like an informative approach for researchers. So it's not like more like into like people. So it's I'm driving that into the researchers, like, or the experts in the fields, and also like researchers like me, to be able to be well informed about this area of applications into what we're doing. So yeah.
Are these ISO standards or are these based on like domestic standards? How does that work?
So it's more, I don't know, like it's basically like, I feel like it's what people read, and it's they read about it, and then they just like can make decisions into how the limitations I'm going to like put into the paper that I'm writing into the paper, and then they can also like provide solutions just by reading the paper.
Let me see if I can reframe that question. Are like the novel, the experimentation you're doing, the novel approaches is allowing you to annotate the performance of different techniques to see
Yeah.
what yields a better accuracy and what has a better performance and what sequence of methodology yields the best results. Now,
Mm.
I'm asking, are the data sets and the things that you're producing based on an international standard that any researcher in any country can use? Or is this more focused on like domestic standards here in the US? Because I recognize, and I've come across individuals in Nigeria and Kenya and Portugal and Italy that they have their own climate research and things like that. They're all doing their own kind of research with generative AI adapted to it. But I'm just curious, like, what you create, will that be able to be consumed in Italy or anywhere else?
Yeah, so I'm making sure that it's more like the international standard, because one of my chapters is dealing with like, understanding how this, I mean, the extent of the algorithm also like in geospatial awareness. Is it because it's built more on the Western parts, Western culture. So like, I mean, Western data. So, and how can it be used for low resource data, like settings? So, and that's the reason why. I mean, basically, I'm just kind of like, you have to make sure in the PhD dissertation, you have to make sure everything links together. So, the first chapter have to link to the last chapter, basically. So, like the first chapter is basically I'm making sure that it's more international standard, because that would question a lot if I don't do that. So, yeah.
Are you using any of the NASA data sets? I'm
Um,
not sure. Have they been taken away, or are they still kind of used by
I really do not know, but I think they are still being used, because I think one of my colleagues used that, but I'm not using any of the NASA data set. So the data set I'm using is basically what people have done before, like replicability. I'm also introducing replicability into my research. So that's like what data exists and what exactly like that would, it's going to be an indicator of like replicability in my research. So, and also like inform like, okay, this is better in more way because we have the open source data. So that's what I'm doing.
Are there any words of encouragement that you can pass on to any young scientists? I think you're really in a very unique area, right? Geography, very niche. Uh, Geography and computer science, even more of a niche. So, is there anything that you can share with folk watching this that have seen the whole way through, on going through this kind of very unique journey?
Oh yeah, I mean, one thing I would say is that, I mean, if you're working on research, basically, or like doing any form of work, it's not to actually give up, because, I mean, I think I've shared this with you. So I mean, last year we were like up to it, and I'm thinking like how crazy my program is and everything, and difficulties I actually like faced. So I feel like you, once you have like a vision or a goal, you have to like just put your mind into it and be like, oh yes, I mean, there are challenges that will come in, and then you just have to like face it and be like, okay, I can do this, and just speak to yourself and just talk to yourself like, yes, I can do this. Because last year was really crazy. I told you we were on to it together, and then we were talking about it so many times how crazy it was in my program. So I feel like that really helped me and strengthened me like this year. Like I'm just like going through difficulty on and difficult times, and just like being able to just stand it and like we stand it like, okay, yeah, I'm doing this research, I'm doing this work, whatever, I'm the output or whatever. We're very like, I mean, for everyone, I believe if you start something, you probably would have vision on how it's gonna end, or just think about it that, oh yes, this is what I'm thinking about. Or even if you're having a startup, you think about like your startup, you're thinking about that it's going to be turned big or something. So I feel, yes, just putting in all you can at that time, even if it doesn't look like what you are thinking at some point, you should still continue doing it and pursuing it. Yeah.
the more you do, the more you learn, the more it changes.
Exactly. So like, yeah, based on what Apple last year, like all the difficulties, I've learned so much, like, and I've grown out of it. And a lot of things I wouldn't even repeat. Like, I'm like, I've learned so much out of this, and I don't think it's gonna repeat itself just because I've learned this. So yes, it's basically like just being able to like overcome. And at the end of the day, you put your smile on yourself. I'm like, oh, I would able to do this, then there's no challenge that we can't actually face. So yes, that's gonna be like my little advice.
Mary, it's been a pleasure speaking with you on the podcast. And it's not the first. I mean, it's the first, but not the last podcast. We can always intervene at any other point. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I see Michael and Omar and Key have stuck around. So, yeah, have a good rest of your evening. And
You too. Yeah, bye.